Have you ever felt a quiet change in a connection? Not a fight, not a breakup. It's just a subtle thinning, where something familiar stopped reaching you the same way. There was no clear moment to point to, no sentence that explained it. Just a growing space where emotion used to respond automatically. You still showed up, still listened, still cared, but something in you stopped bracing. The silence felt different this time, not heavier, not threatening, almost informative. As if your nervous system stopped asking what it meant and started noticing what was actually there. That moment, when reaction gives way to awareness, is often the beginning of a deeper kind of clarity. Emotional distance does not always announce itself loudly. More often, it becomes visible through subtle internal shifts. Changes in how you interpret silence. How quickly you respond. How much you feel responsible for maintaining connection. These are not dramatic moments. They are quiet recognitions. They show up when emotional awareness begins replacing emotional urgency. These are 10 signs you are becoming aware of emotional distance, not as rejection, but as information. 1. Silence registers as information, not rejection. Silence no longer lands as an emotional threat that demands immediate meaning. Instead, it arrives as a signal that can be observed without panic. You notice the absence without filling it with fear, blame, or imagined conclusions. This shift reflects a nervous system that no longer equates quiet with abandonment. Emotionally, this creates space between stimulus and interpretation. You begin distinguishing between what is happening and what you used to assume was happening. Silence becomes descriptive rather than personal. It tells you something about the state of connection, not about your worth. This awareness softens emotional reactivity and replaces it with calm noticing. The distance is seen, not fought. 2. You stop checking for reassurance signals. You notice yourself no longer scanning messages, tone, or timing for proof of care. The impulse to decode reassurance fades. Emotionally, this reflects reduced dependence on external regulation. Your sense of safety becomes less tied to immediate confirmation. You still notice communication patterns, but they no longer dictate your internal state. This shift often feels quieter than expected. There is less tension in waiting, less urgency in interpretation. Reassurance becomes optional rather than necessary. Awareness replaces vigilance. 3. You recognize distance without needing to fix it. You become aware of emotional gaps without feeling responsible for closing them. The reflex to repair, explain, or adjust softens. Emotionally, this marks a release from overfunctioning. You allow the distance to exist without assigning yourself a task. This does not mean disengagement, it means containment. You recognize that not all distance is yours to manage. This awareness brings steadiness rather than withdrawal. The connection is observed as it is. No immediate action follows. 4. You feel less urge to explain yourself. You notice the impulse to clarify, justify, or emotionally narrate yourself has quieted. Your inner experience feels less on trial. Emotionally, this reflects increased internal grounding. You trust that understanding does not always require explanation. Misalignment no longer triggers a need to defend your intentions. You allow silence around your inner state. This reduces emotional leakage. Presence becomes quieter. You speak when necessary, not to secure connection. Awareness replaces self-explanation. 5. Distance feels neutral rather than painful. The emotional charge around distance diminishes. It no longer stings or alarms in the same way. Emotionally, this suggests acceptance rather than numbness. You feel the space without resistance. Distance becomes a condition, not a wound. This neutrality allows clarity to form without emotional distortion. You are not avoiding feeling. You are no longer amplifying it. The connection is assessed calmly. Awareness stabilizes emotion. 6. You no longer rush to respond. Response timing slows naturally. Not out of strategy, but regulation. Emotionally, urgency gives way to pacing. You allow yourself time to feel before replying. This reflects restored internal rhythm. Your responses are no longer driven by fear of loss. They come from presence rather than pressure. Silence between messages feels tolerable. You remain connected without immediacy. Awareness replaces speed. 7. You catch yourself listening more than reaching. Your attention shifts from initiating to observing. Emotionally, pursuit relaxes into receptivity. You notice more than you push. This creates emotional distance that is not defensive, but discerning. You allow the connection to show you its natural movement. Listening becomes a form of information gathering. You learn through patterns rather than effort. This reduces emotional strain. Presence becomes quieter. Awareness leads. 8. You sense disconnection before it's spoken. You notice subtle changes in energy, responsiveness, and presence. Emotionally, intuition becomes clearer without being reactive. You register shifts without needing confirmation. This awareness feels grounded, not anxious. You trust what you sense without escalating it. The disconnection is acknowledged internally first. This creates emotional preparedness rather than shock. You are less surprised by outcomes. Clarity arrives earlier. Awareness sharpens perception. 9. You notice yourself staying grounded while distance remains. Distance no longer destabilizes you. Emotionally, your center holds even when connection feels thinner. You do not collapse into self-doubt or overreach. You remain present within yourself. This reflects emotional autonomy. The connection is no longer the sole regulator of your state. You can coexist with uncertainty. Grounding replaces attachment-driven reaction. Stability becomes internal. Awareness anchors you. 10. You recognize familiar patterns repeating. You begin noticing emotional cycles without romanticizing or excusing them. Emotionally, repetition becomes visible rather than hopeful. You see similarities across time, not just moments. This awareness is not cynical. It is clarifying. Patterns lose their mystery. You stop interpreting repetition as potential. Then you recognize it as information. This brings quiet realism. Awareness completes the picture. Becoming aware of emotional distance does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing care with reaction. The shift is subtle, often unnoticed at first. You do not harden. You do not withdraw dramatically. You simply begin seeing more clearly. Distance becomes something you can hold without urgency, without panic, without self-blame. This kind of awareness does not rush decisions. It allows understanding to settle slowly. You remain present with what is, instead of chasing what was. And in that space, emotional truth becomes easier to recognize. Some clarity arrives quietly, not through answers, but through steadiness, not through action, but through seeing. Thank you for being present with this reflection.